I think if more leaders did that, if they came into meetings knowing I'm the flight attendant here, that everybody's watching me to see how I'm reacting to this crisis, we'd have far fewer crises.
This podcast is brought to you by Hey Taco, the only peer-to-peer recognition platform that uses tacos to help teams around the world share gratitude. I'm Doug.
I'm Una.
This is our podcast, Amazing Teams. Liz Hofreuter, welcome to the Amazing Teams podcast.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and to be with the two of you.
Liz, before we introduce you, I just want to give a taco to Katie Reagan for introducing the three of us. So she made this podcast episode possible. For our listeners, Liz is the head of school at Wheeling Country Day School, which is an independent private school in Wheeling, West Virginia, established in 1929, almost 100 years ago. She's also the founder of EDGE, which is a virtual and campus-based tutoring center that specializes in helping students aged 4 to 24 with language-based learning differences. And last but not least, and my personal favorite, is that she was a coxswain for the rowing team at Princeton University. Liz, did I miss anything?
The only thing I'd add is I am the selfish mother of two daughters, because a lot of what I did at Country Day, I did because I wanted them to have the best education possible.
Liz, let's start from this rowing thing that you did at Princeton University. When you and I chatted, you were reflecting and saying you didn't necessarily realize how much it has affected your leadership and building teams throughout your career. What did you learn from rowing? How has it actually affected you?
So I think rowing is much more in the national mindset now than it ever was before, with the movie Boys in the Boat having just come out. But what people don't often think about is when a boat is moving, the people who are actually moving it forward can't see where they're going. And the only person who can see the competition and the direction and actually steer is the coxswain. And in the sport of rowing, the coxswain is very important, but very ancillary. The stars of the show are the stroke and the boiler room, as we call it, and the bow. And for all those reasons, those 8 athletes are just absolutely moving the world forward. But the coxswain is keeping it on course and setting the game plan. And what I was very good at as a coxswain is helping the team get together before we start and actually visioning what the race was going to look like. It is a quick race, but your body is exhausted. And then the coxswain says, I want a power 10, because that's how you move past somebody. And you've got to get everybody in a place that they can physically do more than they thought they were capable of. And that's really what leadership is. But the thing that makes it even more true for rowing than anything else is if you have ever seen an Olympic boat row, it looks like art on glass. It is smooth. If you have ever watched that team the first day in the boat, it is chaos. And if one person isn't really doing the work they're supposed to be doing, they will literally, what it's called, catch a crab and be thrown from the boat. So there's so much about the nature of rowing that I pulled from my own heart into what I've done as a leader. But when rowing works, it is so much greater than the sum of the parts. And it's transcendent. Literally, when those 8 people are moving in step, the boat is lifted from the water and propelled forward, and it's effortless. Even though you're working really hard, it feels effortless. And I've had those swing moments at Country Day. I've had those swing moments with my leadership team and with my faculty. And I would say it's like hitting a perfect golf shot, which I think I've never done, because it makes you say, I want that again.
Sounds like an amazing team in Princeton. Did that set a high standard and a high goal for your future teams in your career?
I without knowing it. Yeah, absolutely. I started rowing in a 4 instead of an 8, which means there were 4 rowers. We were the 3rd varsity boat. It was just fun. Then suddenly, sophomore year, things weren't going well for the varsity. If your listeners don't understand rowing, what you do when you're preparing in spring training in a season is 2 boats within the team race head to head against each other. And then the coach pulls the boats together. You literally have to take oars across each other's laps. And he tells you who to switch. And then you row the race again. So the 2-seat switches, you row the race again. If a different boat wins, that person just got bumped from the team. and everybody saw it. It's much different than other sports. My sophomore year, my coach yelled, pull the boats together. And just so you know, your heart is in your throat when he says that. And everybody's waiting to see who he thinks the problem is. And he said, switch the coxswains. I almost passed out. Are you kidding me? And he switched us and we won. So I went from the third varsity 8 to the first varsity. And that was it. I was in the first varsity for the next 3 years. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I just knew that I could do this great little foursome. And now my 4 had grown into an 8 my sophomore year. And suddenly I was the face and the eyes of Princeton rowing for women. And I took the responsibility very, very seriously and became mother to everybody. So not only did I take all the good stuff from rowing forward, I took the bad stuff too, because I do have this sense of maternal responsibility for the people on my team that I'm actually working really hard to let go of.
That's incredible. I'm curious, what gives a team and the edge when it comes to rowing?
I love that. Thanks for that segue into it. So what really gives a team, and you can lose it, which is why every single race day matters, is the ability to hit the water at the exact same time. So your focus has to be on the shoulder of the person in front of you so that your bodies are truly in step. And if you swim, you know the moment of pushing the water under your own body. Well, in rowing, you do that same thing, but you do it with a very long oar. And if those oars are absolutely in sync, then it's effortless. But one person loses focus, gets a little off, it's not effortless anymore.
Wow. It seems like it could be kind of stressful, maybe.
It is a little stressful. And remember, there's a stroke that's facing you. So I sit and look at the rower that is chosen to keep the pace, but she has no idea what the pace is. I can see the pace on my little, I can't even remember what it's called now. And I know what the coach wants the pace to be for certain parts of the race. And I know the pace and the rate that the other team usually rows at. So I have to say to her, and you move the mic and say, we're at 32, we need to be at 36. And she can't really speak because she's working as hard as possible. So that's a moment that you also have to just really be in sync with your stroke. So just like my assistant heads and I are in sync, and they know they can say something that might be controversial, and we'll figure it out later. We don't have time to figure it out now. We got to get through this 6-minute race, but we'll get it right. And the year we won nationals, I could just talk to my stroke with my eyes. We didn't have to do anything else.
That's great. One last thing around the rowing, where we work in Alexandria, Virginia. They were out in the water yesterday. Or was it what day was it? Wednesday rowing, and all I could hear was somebody yelling. It almost sounded like they're yelling through a bullhorn or something.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking to myself, I don't know if I could sit there and be yelled at like this.
That's exactly right. So it's interesting, now with Peloton, that's the whole thing, right? There's somebody in your head yelling at you and telling you to move forward, but you can choose somebody else because you like to be loved instead of yelled at when you work out. You got to figure that out. And as a coxswain, and this is so much leadership, you have to figure out how to use your voice to get all 8 people doing their best. So your stroke may need you to ride her hard and yell and scream, but it may kill your 2-seat. And that's what that vision meeting ahead of time is all about. And now that I've been taught what vision means in leadership, I was always telling a story to the team of the way the race was going to go. The difference between rowing and leading a team, though, is we knew the outcome was a win. Cross the line first. But when somebody talks to me about a win in education, I can't stand that terminology, because I have so adapted to this idea that Simon Sinek has put out about the infinite game instead of the finite game. But every race was a finite game.
Got it. Let's switch gears and talk about the Wheeling School there. Can you give our listeners just kind of like an idea of what it is, what it looks like? Like if we're driving up to the front of the building, what are we going to see? How's it going to feel?
So if you drove up to the front of the building, you're in Wheeling, West Virginia, which is a little panhandle about 45 minutes south of Pittsburgh. And as soon as I say West Virginia, you get a certain picture in your mind. But instead, it looks very much like a California outdoor campus. Each one of my classrooms is a separate building. You have to walk outside to get to them. It's raining today. You would pull up and see kids outside. They'd have raincoats on and boots because there's no bad weather, only bad clothing. You would see kids laughing and smiling no matter where you went, because this is a place of joyful learning. You would see teachers laughing and smiling everywhere you went. No matter what time of day you pull out, someone is outside. The other thing to sort of know is if you saw the Christmas special, The Land of the Misfit Toys, I know everybody doesn't like that, but that is really who we are, because I truly believe that every child at some point in their educational journey is a neurodivergent learner. Even if it's because you broke your ankle or you slept really poorly or your parents are getting a divorce or your grandmother just died, something is going on in a child's life that makes learning hard that day or fearful that day. And so as a leader and as a teacher, you got to come into the day knowing you are going to set the temperature and the mood. And that means you don't get to be angry or grumpy or screaming, because that's not what's going to let everybody learn. And I think if more leaders did that, if they came into meetings knowing I'm the flight attendant here, that everybody's watching me to see how I'm reacting to this crisis, we have far fewer crises.
The way you describe the school, I think I want to drive up to Wheeling, West Virginia and see your school building.
My 85-year-old father used to come just because he said this is where he could always get a dose of happiness.
What a better compliment than that. I don't think there is one. I know that when you took over the Wheeling Country Day School, you had a little over 80 students.
Right.
And now 15 years later, you have a lot over 230.
Yes.
You mentioned how creating the swing and rowing is something you have created at Wheeling Country Day School with your teachers and the students. How did you do that? How did you get from 80 to 230, from chaos to the swing?
So there's a leadership video that is dancing at a music festival. And they talk about the first one that gets up and dance, you know it, and that's the lone nut. And then the second person that gets up is the first follower, but it's the third person that makes a movement. When I got here, there were some things happening that I absolutely knew wasn't best for kids and were archaic, but there's so much in education that remains archaic. And I just couldn't be the leader of a school that was still running a school like it was 1989, which is when I graduated college, but that's the term a lot of people use. So I took one person with me to a conference that was Learning in the Brain in Boston. And it was just the two of us immersing ourselves in the conference. And she leaned over and said, "I'm in. How do we change the place?" And they played that video at that conference shortly thereafter. So we went back to campus and this is such one of those fireball moments. We had a teacher's meeting. And at that teacher's meeting was a former student of mine who's become a child's rock star in LA. And he happened to be there to work with kids that day, but he came to the teacher's meeting just to watch. And we played music. And without really explaining to everybody what we were doing, I said, we got to start moving this place forward. There are things we can do differently. Let's get people visiting our campus. And I was sort of saying things and starting to dance and had it planned that Bridget would get up and dance with me. And she got up and started dancing with me. And I know people were like, what is going on? And all of a sudden, a third person got up. And she's like, let's do it. And she's dancing. And now the whole room danced. And some of them still aren't dancing. But another 3 or 4, maybe even 5 people got up and started dancing. And we never looked back from that moment. We literally took the video and made it real. If she weren't on board, then it's top down and it's mandated and it's not going to work. And when you're working with kids, they have to believe you. A 9-year-old knows when you're faking it. So it's got to be in your blood and you got to really want to do it. And to be quite honest with you, that's why leaving this year, because this is my last year as head of school, is hard, because the kids will look at me and say, I don't get it. You love this. Why are you leaving? And they're right. Because if I didn't really love it, we wouldn't have had the success we had. And that's the swing. And the other thing that we're given the opportunity to do is we have an event, and our event is next week. And at that event, We don't hire caterers. We don't hire people to run the event. We do it, the faculty. And people actually get to watch the swing at that event because most people don't get to watch leadership in action. And at our event, they do. And I've had a number of people donate to the school specifically because of the way the faculty works together.
That's great. I actually came across your It's Time video, and I got to say, I was kind of touched. I started feeling a little tingly. I don't know if it was the gentle music playing while you were talking or what, but I also discovered a bunch of other great videos that you've produced over the years. In fact, I found one, and I'm going to quote what you said in the video. It's about grades and what grades mean to you. And you said, to me, it's feedback so that the learning can continue. It's not an end result. It's part of the learning process. And it made sense to me, being somebody who struggled in school, and I felt that pretty deep. I guess my question here is around the videos, like what inspired you to create all these videos and the messaging in these videos? Where does that all come from?
Well, I know you're going to ask me about my 5 tacos. So one of my tacos, it's to Luke Hladek, who is my assistant head for culture and advancement. And he produces all of those. Okay. All I do is get the mic and he and I talk about a topic. As Katie and I talked about before she introduced us, you will love the flow. If you give me a written speech, it doesn't have the same authenticity. So we don't talk about what I'm going to say. We pick a topic that means something to me, and I talk to the camera as if I'm talking to you, Doug, directly. And I think if education has a travesty, it's exactly the one you pulled out. And the kids who I worry about aren't the kids who are struggling. It's the kids who get straight A's. I really worry about them and what life is going to look like for them because we don't set up the world the way we set up school. And they're not always going to hit that success. And someday that wall's going to come. And have we prepared them? So at Country Day, we're all about fail forward. And if your kid's about to graduate and they haven't had the big fail, we failed, and we're going to make sure your kid fails. And that's exactly where we are in the year this year. I'm teaching 8th grade English for the last 2 months so I can make sure every one of those kids has a failure. I had a child years ago who said, your tagline should be, at Country Day, we fail here. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't quite make people want to come, but I love it. So the video is really a way to touch. It's real. You can see my face. You can hear my voice. You can't do that in an email.
Yeah, I agree. And I also agree about the failing and how important it is. You know, it's something that we as humans need to learn. We need to learn how to fail, right? My kid plays hockey and he's at the point where they're starting to check, and you have to learn how, not only how to check, but how to receive a check. And so that kind of reminds me of just failure in life. We need to learn how to fail, and we need to learn how to get back up after a failure. And if you have a kid that's going through school, getting straight A's, they go off, grow up, go into the world, they might have a difficult time dealing with failure because they never learned how to deal with it and how to handle it and how to process it mentally. So I believe in that. And it's kind of refreshing to hear that you also believe in that. And that's what you all are teaching there.
I'm going to change a picture in your mind forever. A lot of schools will do a picture of all the seniors in the t-shirt or sweatshirt of where they're going to go to college. And parents look at that and think, oh, wow, what a great school. Well, in that picture, you are screaming, education is product. And I am telling you, education is process. So the kid in that picture who's going to be really successful might not have a college t-shirt on because they've already learned so much about failure and overcoming it and growth and fresh ideas that didn't match the system. And in my mind, when you take education as process, then you've really impacted a child and an adult, by the way.
I think that might be a good segue into my next question, which is, how do you lead kids versus how do you lead adults? One thing that you said that really resonated is that a 9-year-old has to believe you. They can smell through inauthentic behavior, right? As adults, we oftentimes give each other lip service and politeness, and we say, yeah, I'll get in touch with you. We don't really mean that. If you say that to a kid, they'll call you and say, hey, you didn't get in touch, right? And now I don't trust you.
That's right.
How do you lead kids? How do you lead people? Do you just lead them both the same way?
I believe that everybody's a 9-year-old at heart, and everybody wants to be loved, and everybody wants to be heard. So when I'm really talking to a 9-year-old, and by the way, my office is right next to 3rd grade, they deserve my undivided attention. And I need to stop what I'm doing, and I need to get eye level. And I told you I'm short. I still need to squat down and get eye level for most of them. And I need to really listen, actively listen to what they're saying. And when they've gone on too long, I need to know how to tell them, we've got to pick this up another time. If their idea is that I should serve chocolate milk at lunch that they want to talk about, then I need to put some ownership back on them. Okay, why? And I need to respect their thinking. And I don't think we respect the thinking of children enough in this country. You can take everything I just say and talk to me about my director of maintenance or the assistant head for learning, because that's really what everybody wants. Sometimes I feel like the Pied Piper because I am good at leading children and they'll follow me. And they'll follow me because I'm authentic and because I do respect what they have to say. And I think their ideas really matter. One of my favorite days on campus is when our 5th graders have a Lego robotic competition and they have 5 minutes to complete as many tasks as they can. The reason it's my favorite is because at age 10, you can never make a robot do exactly what you want. So they fail. There's no adult to turn to. If you spend time blaming someone else, then you're going to lose your 5 minutes doing the wrong thing. And while there's 2 rounds of it, there's no dress rehearsal. And I believe there's no dress rehearsal in general. If somebody's having a bad 4th grade year, they're never getting 4th grade back. So you've got to figure out how to fix it and make 4th grade better. Elementary school is not a dress rehearsal for middle school. Middle school is not a dress rehearsal for high school. And college is not the end all be all that we were all just getting ready for all along the way. Those years matter. And that Lego competition teaches 10-year-olds that you can face adversity. You can turn to somebody who maybe isn't in your best friend, but together you can problem solve and you can have an outcome that is better than expected. Most people wouldn't give 10-year-olds that opportunity.
We forget sometimes they're just little humans.
They are.
In another 10 years, they're going to be running the next startup that makes $10 million a year and quitting college to do so, or inventing something, or being the greatest student teacher that there is, right? They're only 10 years away from that.
The other side of that is a 3-year-old who a parent expects to be potty trained and zip their coat and bring all their stuff home has been alive for 1,000 days. Let's cut some slack. Let's manage our own expectations.
Liz, can you tell us more about the fireball moments, going back to the swing with your team? What is a fireball moment?
So that's a really beautiful image, isn't it? Like, wow, it's a moment of change. And we've had a bunch of them at Country Day. When we reopened our middle school, when we opened a Center for Multisensory Learning that turned into EDGE, when we first raised over $100,000 at our fundraiser, when that kid who couldn't read finally started to read, that one's not so much as the other ones. We started a tradition where we actually got together and did a fireball shot. So it's called a fireball moment because we allow ourselves to drink in the joy. And I think that's really important because when there is a moment of problem, everybody's going to gather around the table and figure out, what did we do wrong? What can we do next? How can we learn from this? But too often we get the joy, like the $200,000 grant that came in. I'm immediately going, what's the next one? You know, you've got to stop and you got to toast and you got to say, we did it. And you have to celebrate the joy in the same way that you agonize over the defeat and learn from it. Again, I got to give credit to everybody else. It's a fireball moment.
Liz, is there anything else on your mind in terms of leading kids, building your amazing team at Wheeling Country Day School?
I guess there are 2 things that I would add, and I'm looking because we keep all of our maxims on a whiteboard in the conference room here. And one of the things we just added in the last year is called Don't Get the Chair. And it came from the executive director of the American Kidney Foundation. And that's the idea that if we're having a meeting and there's 5 chairs, but there's 6 of us, the person that jumps up and goes and gets a chair for the last person that came in is actually putting themselves in a different place in the meeting and elevating someone else and not letting that person be resourceful. But if we're all sitting in our chairs and someone comes in and there's no chair and we say, hey, there are extra chairs next door, then we're giving them ownership that Maybe you're late to the meeting, but you also can take care of yourself. You don't need to be taken care of. And I don't have to put myself in a position of that maternal, let me take care of you, which actually can lead to burnout. And more importantly, it may feel like I'm burdening him to go get his chair, but really I'm empowering him to take care of himself. And that is something that we've really gotten good at in the past year. And then the other one is just pivot to positive. And boy, that's the key with kids, right? If you're positive, when two children get sent to the office, which rarely happens here, and they've pushed each other or they've yelled at each other, or that's usually about as bad as it happens here. I usually lead with, when do you two get along? And it blows their minds. They're ready to get yelled at. They've braced for impact. And instead, the head of school is saying, tell me about when you guys like each other. Or when a kid is absolutely miserable and the mother has dragged the child in here to complain about a teacher. And I start with, when do you love reading? Usually the adult in the room is saying, but that is not what we're here to talk about. No, actually it is. Because what we all want is for the child to grow and learn. And in the theory, we want our kids to be happy, but that's not really what we want. Because happy is getting everything you wanted. But being able to work and find purpose, that's real happiness. That's joy instead of happiness.
Yeah, I love that. That speaks to me. I think it probably speaks to you, Una.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, you got to have that feeling of fulfillment. Very important for being able to find happiness, right? Una loves telling me that happiness is an internal job, right?
Yeah. Choose joy.
Choose joy. Yeah, that's great. Let's talk about the tacos. You'd already given one of your 5 tacos. Most of our listeners know with Hey Taco, you have 5 tacos to give each day. And these tacos are to be given to someone to show your appreciation or to recognize someone for something they've done. So you have 4 left to give, Liz. Who are you giving your last 4 to?
So my next one is to Asher, who's a 2nd grader here, who came bursting into the office 2 days ago with a great idea for what the theme should be for the school for next year. And he thought the words should be anything. And he had mapped out all the activities we should do next year to have the theme be anything. And he said, because here we really do believe you can be anything. And for a 2nd grader to come bouncing into the front office and tell the head of school what the theme should be, that deserves a taco. My next taco would be to a 1st grader. And don't worry, there are some other adults. This 1st grader looked at me and said, I just don't understand why you're leaving. And I said, well, don't you think your teachers take really good care of you and you are learning a lot? And she said, yeah, definitely. And I said, see, so I've done my job. They're ready to take it on without me. And she leaned in and whispered to me, maybe not as ready as you think. You matter. And for a 1st grader to say to a 57-year-old authority figure, you matter, boy, I hope she never loses that. So Poppy gets a huge Hey Taco. My 3rd Hey Taco might seem very strange, but it is to my mom, who when I took this job 15 years ago, told me I could be a good mom even if my kids ate out. That sometimes being a good mom is only really being with your kids and really being with them 2 hours a day. It wasn't being at their beck and call. And I miss her and I wish she were here to give me advice on all the other things, but I have to share that advice with every woman that has children that is listening. You are a good mom. You are not living up to any other standard that is false. And you're certainly not living up to the Instagram standard. So my last one, I wanted to give to my daughter, who actually threw away the wrappers from her lunchbox today. And I told her I was going to give her a taco for actually doing the little thing that matters. And she said, that's embarrassing. Don't you dare. And so I had to give it to her because she's 15. And if I'm embarrassing her, that means I'm doing a really good job as a mom. And if she's feeling like I'm a nerd and I'm weird, then she's doing a really good job as a daughter. So the last Hey Taco goes to Ella Landini, who actually for the first time all week threw the stuff away from her lunchbox that she didn't eat the day before without being asked.
Wow.
I hope she gets to listen to this.
Someone will tell her.
Liz, thank you so much for being on our podcast. but more importantly, for sharing all that you've learned in the last decades of your experience. We don't get to talk to education leaders as often as we probably should, because your insights were just gold mines of things that we can take away. And then I'm sure our listeners will be able to take away as well and apply today.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. As I said to you, this is a gift to me to get to just focus on the joy of leadership and of education is something that I don't get to do often enough. And thank you for reminding me I should.
Yeah, I just want to chime in and also thank you. Because of my struggles, I thought that I wanted to get into teaching and do what I never received, right, as a child. So I had the vision that I could become a teacher and teach in a way that I felt like I needed to be taught. And so I appreciate people who are spending their days with the little people and all the things that you're doing. I appreciate you. So thank you.
I just have to say to you, Doug, you are teaching. You have a very large classroom and you have a very different medium, but you are teaching, and it's actually where I'm going next. So instead of being contained in a classroom or contained on a campus, I'm trying to follow in your footsteps. So please remember every day that you are teaching.
Thank you for that reminder. Yeah. Well, thank you again. It was great chatting with you. And we're going to have a bunch of links in our show notes to some of the stuff that you mentioned. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks for listening. One of the important things about building a team is gratitude. If you're looking to add more gratitude into your team, check out heytaco.com. We are clearly biased, but it really does work. Use the code AMAZINGTEAMS to receive 15% off for the first 3 months of your subscription.